Dogtooth, the second feature from Academy Award-nominated director Yorgos Lanthimos, is an unnerving depiction of parental instinct and influence. The film explores themes of manipulation, control, distrust, ignorance, deliberate miseducation, and rebellion through a profoundly pathogenic family living in isolation in rural Greece. At first glance, this household is normal, composed of a father, mother, eldest daughter, middle son, and youngest daughter. They reside in a sprawling and luxurious compound-esque home, complete with a large pool and abundant yard. The children occupy their days with homeschooling, swimming, and invented games. The father leaves for work each day, where he runs a factory. The family isn't facing financial problems. This isn't Gummo, City of God, or Winter's Bone. But directly opposing any comfort the family's wealth may bring viewers is the realization that, instead of a remote getaway for a tight-knit family, the estate is an inescapable landscape of boredom for the children, who have been physically and intellectually sheltered from the outside world. Rather than a traditional narrative structure in which the family is faced with a specific dilemma that they must overcome over the course of the plot, the drama of the film hinges on the revelation of the disturbing lengths the parents have gone to protect their children. By following their quotidian, sometimes banal conversations and activities, Lanthimos unveils the shockingly perverse and vile dynamic that lies beneath a calm facade. The film is a plethora of stomach-churning situations. The children, who are nameless, endure various forms of physical abuse from both parents. They know so little about the outside world that when a kitten finds its way into the yard, the son takes it for a ferocious beast and savagely kills it with a pair of garden shears. The family's single television is used when the parents are alone to consume porn on VHS, and when the children are present, to watch old family movies that have clearly filled many of their nights, as the youngest mimics the entire contents in perfect sync. The children have been led to believe that another brother lives beyond the tall fence that surrounds their house, and at one point, the father fabricates the death of the brother to squash any thoughts of leaving. In an incredibly uncomfortable scene at the dinner table, the father explains that a child is only ready to leave the home when their second dogtooth comes in, explaining the children's hesitation to leave their hellish, repressive imprisonment.
Έτοιμο να φύγει από το σπίτι του όταν.
Πέσει ο δεξιός κινόδοντας.
Ή ο αριστερός δεν έχει σημασία. Μόνο τότε ο οργανισμός είναι έτοιμος να αντιμετωπίσει όλους τους κινδύνους που παρεφυλάνε.
A worker from the father's factory is brought blindfolded to the estate to satisfy the son's sexual needs and assumedly procreate with him, as he does not wear a condom. This worker also serves as the primary catalyst for the eldest's readiness to leave, as after they begin a relationship in which the child offers sexual favors in exchange for objects from the outside world. Of course, this does not go unpunished. The eldest is beaten over the head with a VHS tape she got in a trade with the worker, and the worker, a whole VHS player. And, shortly before the climactic escape of the eldest daughter, the parents force the eldest to replace the worker as her brother's mating partner. Yeah. The uncanny valley is a phenomenon in contemporary media describing the discomfort elicited in audience members at the sight of an incomplete or slightly off depiction of a person. Imagine the 2004 animated Polar Express or animatronic robots at amusement park rides. There is an obvious attempt at realism, however, it's simply not right. There is an inherently sinister quality to figures which seem to feign humanity, and because of this, viewers may not recognize characters as real enough to be objects of empathy. People have come to the consensus that they can better identify with more abstractly animated characters in films like Finding Nemo, Toy Story, and Shrek. In Dogtooth, Lanthimos draws out this discomfort by expertly engendering a world that we can recognize as realistic in almost all ways, save the sickeningly normalized portrayals of abuse, incest, and repression, specifically through the dialogic interactions of the family members. Herein lies our point of analysis. Sarah Kozloff, who, after receiving her PhD from Stanford, served as the chair of film studies at Vassar College for over 30 years and now works as a novelist, posits that with each line of dialogue, screenwriters and directors fulfill one or more of 9 primary dialogic functions in film. For the purpose of this video essay, we'll be focusing only on the first 6 functions, those which Kozlov deems essential: anchorage of the diegesis in characters, communication of narrative causality, enactment of narrative events, character revelation, adherence to the code of realism, and control of viewer evaluation and emotions. Dogtooth is largely devoid of anchorage of diegesis in characters. This is intentional, as Lanthimos disorients and isolates viewers by depriving them of names by which to identify characters, recognizable landscapes or cityscapes, even going so far as to obfuscate the product the father produces at his factory. Whereas in other films in which this information is revealed in 1 or 2 lines over the first few scenes, Lanthimos holds viewers as ignorant prisoners, just like the children in the story. Because Dogtooth follows such an idiosyncratic family dynamic, Lanthimos had the onerous task of indicating to viewers that they should not expect anything normal from the film. The opening scene epitomizes narrative causality, or establishment of what has led characters to their current position. The children sit in their brightly lit bathroom listening to vocabulary lessons on an antiquated tape player, only the definitions suggested are all wrong, with sea explained as meaning fauteuil, highway as gale, excursion as floor, and carbine as dove. This recording, playing over the bored and uncomfortably framed children, immediately establishes the diegesis of the world as wrong and odd. Another example comes later in the film during the aforementioned dinner scene, in which the father explains why the children are not prepared to leave their home. To these characters, their second Dogtooth not having come in is a perfectly normal reasoning for their being grown adult children living in isolation with their parents. In terms of enactment of narrative events, Lanthimos' dialogue reflects the emotionally devoid nature of the interactions between the characters. He pushes coldness and detachedness to the degree of being utterly transactional, even in sexual situations. The intimacy, excitement, and desire usually evoked in an instance of cunnilingus is apparently absent, replaced instead by a naive and unknowing aseptic deal that works completely against all preconceived conventions. Character revelations are essential in regards to distrust and manipulation. The children, though each continually suffering at the hands of their siblings ratting them out, have no one but each other. Thus, if they do wish to discuss something personal, they are forced to confide in each other. As mentioned earlier, the eldest daughter enters a relationship with the worker who visits the house, and in one of their exchanges obtains VHS tapes of popular films. She waits until everyone is asleep to watch them and hurriedly shuts off the television when she hears her father coming down the hall, so she clearly knows this is forbidden, even if it is not explicitly stated by the parents during the film. Yet shortly afterwards she chooses to reveal her knowledge of the outside world to her siblings by reciting lines and crudely recreating scenes from Jaws, Rocky, and Flashdance. Though she is eventually beaten by her father for consuming external media, these moments of excited sharing with the siblings hint at a curiosity and interest in what lies beyond the walls that surround the house that persist despite the threat of punishment. This resurfaces later on when she suggests to the youngest that her dogtooth feels loose, intimating that she feels either a desire or readiness to leave. Despite how uncomfortable the world of the film is, Dogtooth consistently adheres to the code of realism. In fact, the dialogue of almost the entire film is filled with the routine banalities of the lives of the characters. There are very few moments when the dialogue sets up a distinguished moment of dramatic shift that drives the narrative towards some semblance of an ending. But ironically, this realistic approach only further emphasizes the distance between the characters and the audience. Neither the world of the characters nor the actions of the characters themselves are treated as strange, even by the hired worker who knows what the outside world is like. Lanthimos' characters refuse to acknowledge the absurdity of the situation, and consequently, The audience is left squirming with the awareness that the children are being severely indoctrinated, but without the agency to change anything. Much of the tension of the film then stems from the anticipation of a breaking point. The moment when either one of the children will learn of their parents' deceit or finally decide leaving the house is worth the risk of exposure to the dangers of the outside. The catharsis of the film lies in the release of both these sources of tension, with the disillusionment and escape of the eldest daughter as a climax. And finally, Lanthimos exacts control over his audience in doing very little to orient them in the world. In addition to a severe paucity of expository dialogue, camera work often decapitates characters, framing them in a way that keeps their head out of the frame and therefore dehumanizes them. However, he still manages to shock audience members by portraying recognizable wrongs and situations we can understand in the killing of the interloping cat, beating with tape and tape recorder, removal of a tooth, and most disturbingly, I would argue, acts of incest. These make the audience cringe and create a general feeling of ill at ease. Lanthimos' dialogue expertly reveals the perversion of Dogtooth's diegesis and its explanation, and in the process crafts the same relationship between the world of the film and the viewer as is portrayed between the parents and the children. Profound confusion and indignation rule the viewer's mind. One faces the question, in what world could a family be so incredibly wrong? However, almost all visual components lend themselves to a stylized but realistic portrayal of our current world. His world and the drama that keeps us gripped until the film's last moments are centered around an intense longing for normalcy and the repeated denial of this request.